Hi, and welcome to ADAC Answers, an education podcast for all. I'm your host, Erin Black. ADAC specializes in providing to private school leaders and teachers customized professional development programs to assist their schools with meeting individual student learning needs and increasing overall student achievement. Led and staffed by passionate, committed professionals, ADAC prides itself on delivering to its clients and the students and families whom its clients serve precise solutions to their unique education challenges. ADAC stands for Accountability, Delivery, Access, and Community, 4 words we believe epitomize our work. We hope you enjoy today's episode and join us in listening to future episodes discussing all things education. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of ADAC Answers. Today, we will be talking about Catholic school education, and we have a guest speaker, Pat Donoghue, the Executive Director of the Secretariat of Catholic Education for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the USCCB. Thank you so much for being with us today, Pat.
Erin, it's a pleasure and a delight. Thank you.
Thanks. If you just want to take a moment to briefly introduce yourself, and then if you could describe for our audience the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops mission.
Sure. Well, I'm a lifelong Catholic educator, and I have to say that started in my own childhood. Like many others, I went K through 12 to Catholic schools. I did go to a public University of Maryland for my undergraduate, but back to a Catholic Trinity University here in DC for my master's. And I've been involved in Catholic education for over 30 years. I started as a 5th grade teacher, and I taught primarily 5th through 8th grades and different variations of that. I became a vice principal. I became a principal. I spent 2 years as a consultant traveling all over the country and getting a good national level view of Catholic ed. So I come with a heart very much for Catholic schools. I love them. I believe they're such a force for good for the church, but also for the culture and for the Republic, frankly. And so that's what's brought me to my work here at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. It is a mouthful of a title. You did really well with that.
Thank you.
For the audience's sake, I would describe the mission of the Conference of Catholic Bishops as basically an organization ordered to providing support to bishops in their vocation as the successors of the apostles, which is to proclaim the gospel for the salvation of souls. So that's an inspiring and wonderful vision under which to work. Of course, it gets much more granular. We're actually providing literal support in terms of things like organizing meetings and briefings and making sure our bishops understand and are properly guided. But that's the big tent view.
Excellent. Thank you. How would you explain your role as the executive director for the USCCB's Secretariat of Catholic Education?
Yeah, so the Secretariat sort of has an overview shot of really all of the sectors affecting Catholic education. So we have insight into K-12, we have insight into higher education and campus ministry, and we also have an education public policy arm and office. And so, we do not have, any sort of authoritative oversight at all. What we do is we provide staff support to the bishops who serve on the Committee on Catholic Education. It's currently chaired by Bishop Thomas Daly of Spokane, who's himself a Catholic educator. And so my work is, I almost would make it analogous to a funnel. So I funnel information up to the bishops from the field, from all of my many contacts. And then I also distill back into Catholic education sort of the vision and guidance of those bishops. So
that's wonderful. I love that because you definitely need a visual to try to comprehend exactly what you do. But great work, and I love to see that there's a connection between the communication of the Catholic education and the bishops and really a partnership. That's beautiful, and modeling for all of the Catholic educators and communities and leaders that you really do need to have an open communication and a way to partner together. So
For certain.
Focusing on your role as it pertains to Catholic elementary and secondary education, what do you view as the 3 key issues facing these schools across the nation today?
Yeah, I think the first one has to acknowledge the crisis of faith that we find ourselves in. Really all across Christendom, if you will, certainly the Catholic Church, but other Christian denominations. There's just a widespread loss of faith. And this is the most serious thing that we can address as Catholic schools, because we are essential to the church's mission, which ultimately is the salvation of souls. And I think the way the schools do that, my first point is the restoration of the Christian imagination, which means helping to restore in the minds and hearts of our kids an understanding of the world of reality that's consistent with the church. Now, that's no small order, but it is something I think we have to do with great intention. That's number one. Related to that is what has to be fundamental to our mission is serving vulnerable populations, especially children and families who really can't afford Catholic schools, but desire it and are entitled to it. And secondly, are children who are, perhaps intellectually disabled or perhaps learn in other or more diverse ways. We simply have to make that a priority as well. That's a fundamental part that's recognized by the Holy See as a second and important part of our mission. And then I think the third key issue nationally is then we need to work to preserve our religious freedom to accomplish numbers 1 and 2, so that we can be fully who we are and not compromise on these important things. I think especially when we talk about serving kids with special needs, it can be done so much more beautifully within Catholic schools because we understand the nature and dignity of the human person more fully.
Yes.
But in order to do that, we have to preserve the freedom to operate there.
I love all of your responses. I earned my master's degree at the University of Notre Dame in educational leadership. And so we spent a lot of time with the mission and how you drive the mission forward, but also having your personal mission. And you hit on all of the things that they formed us as disciples in that program to do, reach hearts and minds, change hearts and minds of individuals, but also to be inclusive, to be universal as our name calls us to be. So
that's right.
I absolutely love that. And we do have the unique opportunity because we're forming these, beautiful children of Christ and disciples of Christ in a way that is holistic, academic, behavior, social, emotional. And so we can do that by being more open and more inclusive and more diverse and welcoming all to truly walk together through this journey. So thank you for that. I totally agree.
Absolutely.
Do you think there is a renaissance of Catholic school education across the nation?
I certainly think there can be. I do believe that the Holy Spirit is speaking to us as always and guiding in these times. What we need to be doing, I think you mentioned discipleship, and those of us who are engaged in this mission work, like all good disciples, need to be discerning and reading the signs of the times very closely. And so I do believe that the Holy Spirit is calling us to look at that and to even consider the question of what is Catholic education? Is it something that is wholly distinct from other types of education? Does it share the same roots? And the interesting question, I think, is that we must come to an understanding of who we are as church and who we are as the recipients of a centuries-long tradition of education that found its roots really in an ancient tradition, which sees education not just as transmission of facts or skills, but is an enculturation, is a formation of the entire person. And what we have to reckon with is that modern secular education is not founded on that philosophy. But most of our teacher ed programs and most of our state standards come from that. So I think the Renaissance is going to be around helping us rediscover who we are at our roots.
I couldn't agree more. And we have to, ensure that we are preparing as students to be academically on par with those in the secular education formation programs.
I think the reality is we will do better because, frankly, American secular education at the moment is revealing the poverty of its roots. We are seeing, children who are coming out. Sure, they can maybe achieve on a test, but what does it mean to be educated, to have wisdom and virtue? And that is, glaringly lacking. So I don't think we have that. I think what we will be able to do fully restored is really represent to the culture what a true education looks like.
Yes, I totally agree. And, with the key value that you believe, our belief that God is in all things, and to
Absolutely.
really form individuals academically, but also in a way to be global leaders.
That's right. It's not a compromise. You don't, when we talk about forming them and enculturating them, we absolutely need to form those intellectual faculties, but we have to start with the human aspect of that. How does a person even begin the process of articulating ideas, and how do we see the world, and what role does wonder play in this kind of thing? Those are the questions that we need to be looking at, not so much looking at what the secular world is doing, because it's not going so very well. Let's look at our own tradition and represent that.
I love that. And that moves us perfectly into my next question. With knowing your experience with classical Catholic education, can you explain its focus?
Yeah. And I think it very much does dovetail with what I just talked about. And again, it has to do with what is the philosophy that is guiding a school entirely, both its curriculum, its pedagogy, not just the faith formation piece. I think our Catholic schools have done remarkably well in providing very solid faith formation. Our catechesis is better. Our teachers are better qualified to be catechists. We're using better materials. The publishers are giving us better things. But when we have that alongside something that is more rooted in, really, you have to look at John Dewey, who was the author of much modern education. He was an atheist. He outright in his own manifesto denied any creator, any divine action, either in the world or in terms of the human person. So there's always going to be a problem there. We won't be able to be fully who we are. So this movement, which is being called Catholic classical education, is an attempt to restore the fundamental principle that Christ is Logos. So they consider themselves Logos centered, meaning that we will look to, the church's understanding of education as enculturation. We will look to the church's understanding of the human person. We will focus on developing those human faculties. And we will use the time-tested liberal arts framework. So grammar, logic, rhetoric, and then into the quadrivium of the maths and sciences, and then finally philosophy and theology. But a word about the term classical, which I have to admit, I'm not a huge fan of, because I think it sounds very limiting and very narrow. And so what I try to tell people, you might be too young for this, Erin, but several decades ago, Coca-Cola decided to change its formula for soda. And it really upset people. They called it New Coke. Everybody hated it, railed against the company. Finally, the company got the message, and they began to go back to their original formula. But when they manufactured it, the cans all said Coke Classic, so that you would understand this was the original. So when we use this term classical education, it's sort of a shorthand for the more original, centuries-long philosophy of education, as opposed to the secular progressive model that emerged really in the 1920s. So that's essentially the biggest difference, I would say.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for the compliment, thinking that I'm too young to know that reference. That made my day, so thank you. Oh, that's great. Is there a growing number of Catholic school leaders embracing classical Catholic school education?
Yeah, I think we're seeing it again because of the fact that the culture is in a state of crisis as well. So we have a sharp increase in depressive episodes. 1 in 5 young girls will experience a major depressive episode in the next year. We have a listlessness. Our kids are falling prey to many different things. And I think, we're looking at how education might be a part of a larger answer. It's not the whole answer. So I think there are a number of bishops certainly who are interested in looking at really that better human formation. If we think about one thing that bishops know very well is the kind of formation that their seminarians receive, or women in consecrated life and women and men in consecrated life receive. And it's certainly a spiritual formation, a pastoral formation, but there's always a human formation. And again, if you're not fully including all that it means to be human, and to develop what's most human in our kids, I think this is where this listlessness comes from. And I'll just tell you a really quick story. When I was first beginning my own journey in this, I came across 2 people with backgrounds in higher education. And one of them was Dr. Michael Hamby, who kind of wrote the program at St. Jerome's Academy. And he had taught for more than 2 decades. He'd been at Villanova, at Baylor, a couple other different places. And one of the things that he saw over time was this kind of growing listlessness among the students. In the beginning, when he first started to teach, he talked about how kids would ask these just amazing questions, really probing, to the point where he'd have to say, I'm going to have to think about that. Over time, the number one question that he was hearing in class was, is this going to be on the test? And it just sort of tells us that there's something that we have been missing, in our work. And then the other person was an author, Susan Weisbauer, who's written quite a lot about this. And she was a humanities professor at William and Mary, and was struck by the fact that while she had the cream of crop of students, they struggled with expressing original ideas in writing or even speaking. They weren't properly reading books. And she took a sabbatical to study what was happening at the elementary ed level. And
really, that's so cool.
And then reproposed another way to form kids. So I would share those 2 little nuggets with you as just some examples of what's driving a lot of this.
Thank you. Yes, and I totally agree. We need to be inquiry based, and we have to make sure that our teaching, or our way to approach teaching, is to get students to take on that load, to be responsible, to try to drive their learning, and to have this purpose and relevance to why they're learning and why they're being formed the way that they are.
By nature, we want to know. We're made for that,
right?
But it can be beaten out of us if we're just cogs going through,
right,
things that don't have meaning. And so that's the goal. Thankfully, our Catholic schools really avoid most of this because we already have such mission-driven teachers. But it's something we can even do better and make ourselves ever more distinct.
I totally agree. Thank you. Shifting to public policy, what do you see as the most significant federal public policy issue or issues that Catholic schools will encounter during the next several years?
Well, I think the first one is the need for a federal school choice bill. We see a lot of parental choice bills moving in the states, and that's all very, very good. But it comes right from church teaching that the parent is the primary educator, and the church also calls on the state to provide true liberty of choice. And the reality is that there are some states across the country that simply will never pass something like this. So in order for all of our parents to benefit, we do need a federal school choice bill. So we're doing quite a lot of advocacy around that. There is such a bill in the House, and it's in the process of getting co-sponsors. We'll be watching that and supporting that as it goes. And the second, again, I've mentioned it earlier, is just the importance of our religious liberty, that we are always sort of holding the federal government in check as far as what it legally can require of us. And, we've had a number of court cases that have affirmed that our Catholicity, fully expressed in our lessons and our materials, is not is not in violation of any legal principles. And we continue to defend that.
Great, thank you. Do you anticipate any threats to ESSA or IDEA programs?
I really don't. I mean, both of those programs are decades old, and our schools have been participating in them for a number of years with very, very few problems or concerns. So I believe that will continue. I don't anticipate any reason it would not at this point.
Is there any thought about reauthorization of IDEA on the horizon?
It's funny. I saw this, thought about this question, and I talked to my public policy person, and she said, really no, at this point, but we are coming up to another election where we think probably maybe the first time in history, education will play a hugely prominent role as a policy issue in a national election. So that perhaps could spur some of this, which would be great.
Yeah, I was about to say, we can hope.
Can only hope.
Any general advice for our Catholic school educators and leaders?
I think I'm so aware of the hard work that they do. They are often tasked with doing an awful lot with very few resources, which over time can be very wearing. So I guess my advice is to, stay very, very close to Jesus, in your teaching. There is only one teacher, and we share in that teaching ministry, but to let him refresh you, and then to pace yourself, especially coming out of the pandemic, which our teachers, our schools simply shone on a national stage. And we did this because we simply were doing what we do every single day, which is to show up, to know our kids and their families very deeply, and be able to intuit what is needed, and then to be able to do it on a dime. I think that's the thing. So I would say, stay close to the heart of Jesus, take care of yourself, your own physical needs, your family, and kind of that idea St. Augustine talked about, ordering our loves properly and making sure things are ordered so that you don't get wiped out in challenging times.
Well, and we are seeing just nationally a mass exodus of individuals leaving education as a whole. Right. So I really love that you pointed out that we need to take care of ourselves. You need to grow closer to Jesus, and then build these authentic relationships, truly authentic relationships that drive you and your why for serving in Catholic schools, because it is a sacrifice for sure.
It is. It is.
But
There's
is 100% worth it. And
right.
To do this work, your heart has to be in it. So I just really appreciate it from an individual that has your title and your status, to recognize that, yes, we do still have room to grow, and we have issues that came out of the pandemic that we really need to focus on, and to ensure that we can sustain this heart and this love for what we do moving forward.
That's right. I agree with that 100%.
Well, thank you so much. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything else you'd like to share?
Well, my only closing thought would just be to convey to teachers out there, how deeply, deeply I respect what they've done, how grateful we all are for their steadfastness in the times of troubles, but in general, and that my love for Catholic Ed and for them and for the students they serve is really, you know, kind of what compels me to challenge us all to think about a still better way. It's not a question of saying, well, things have been wrong before. That's not it at all. There's a lot. The great thing about being Catholic is the church will always take up what's good.
Right.
You know, and we're already doing so much good. So that's consistent. It's just a challenge to find that still better way to address the faith and some of the challenges that are coming up against our kids, and to know that they have my prayerful support the whole way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for donating your time today to share your expertise and your passion. I know that it has inspired me, and I'm sure our listeners as well, to just continue, you know, working within Catholic schools and pushing that mission forward. So
I was really happy to do it, Erin. It was just delightful to talk with you.
It was wonderful to meet you. Thank you. To everyone at home, if you have any follow-up questions you would like to see addressed in a future episode, or if you want to share your thoughts on today's topic, then please submit them to us on social media using the hashtag ADAC Answers. That's right, ADAC, and the word answers to let us know. If you would like to hear future ADAC Answers episodes, then please follow, like, and subscribe. And if you're interested in finding out more about our company and the services we offer, please visit us on our website at www.theadac.com. That is THEADAC.com. Thank you so much for listening to our episode today, and we look forward to you tuning in to our next episode. Again, thank you to all of our listeners from the ADAC team. We'll see you next time.